Clippers, hatch the Clippers.
Oh,
paintings. Sea King.
Are you ready for some football?
Alrighty.
Well, sorry, I didn't bring those other cameras this time.
That's okay.
It's all right. We can use them as backup next time.
Alright, guys, what's going on? I'm Vince.
I'm Greg.
I'm Mark.
And here's episode 3 of our M.V.G vlog. So, guys, if you guys have been paying attention, we get into some pretty neat topics. So, today, we're going to have Mark take it away this time on the first topic.
Well, with recent announcements about many new shows coming to different digital streaming services, I wanted to talk about how high fantasy has become a staple for pop culture. Meaning, with the conclusion of Game of Thrones on HBO, now, HBO has a prequel series in the process of being made, Blood Moon.
Right.
There's announcement of 2 fantasy series on Amazon Prime. The prequel to Lord of the Rings, which we talked about before.
Yep.
And The Wheel of Time, which was an 18-entry novel series, also high fantasy, that was similar to Lord of the Rings and many other swords and sorcery stories. And they've also, Dark Crystal series. Disney Plus announced Willow as like a sequel to Willow, being for that platform. And, they'll probably continue to adapt more. But, it was a favorite genre of mine for many years. Wasn't it one of yours as well?
Oh, actually, it was. When it comes to movies like Willow, Lord of the Rings, and even to an extent, there's an old 1970s cartoon movie that Disney came out with called The Black Cauldron. That actually used to be called The Series of Prydain, or The Adventures of Prydain, which is basically like a 3-book novel. Think of it as like Sword in the Stone, like Arthur stories, meets Lord of the Rings. That's kind of like what it was like. High fantasy to me is sort of like, the best way I could describe it is sort of like the cyberpunk of like fantasy novels and movies and comic books and things of that nature. So the way I look at it is, no matter what generation you're from, it's definitely a fantasy that you can relate to. It's very enjoyable, and there's a lot of themes that you can recognize and that you can enjoy, whether you enjoy through video games, movies, or whatever outlook you look at. And I noticed that, like, being an instructor from my job, I will sometimes talk to students of mine, and I noticed a sudden trend that kind of ties in with the high fantasy, people, when it comes to, movies and video games. A lot of people seem to be going back to Magic, like the cards, Magic, the card series and stuff. And I'm noticing that, they are talking about turning that into a TV show. So, Mark, you're definitely right when I say that, it's always been a genre that's been around, but it's on the rise. It's on the rise. It's almost like becoming matchmaking on the rise, the same way as the Marvel cinema universe is. Ben, what do you think is your outtake on that?
Well, I feel like it's kind of funny that I feel like now, being like a fellow nerd with my friends who are also nerds, I feel like now being nerds is kind of like a cool thing. I feel like it's like a trend.
It is.
Because usually, it's like you got the jocks and all that stuff. But what I think is cool, I feel like because nowadays more imaginatory as far as like video games or comic books or TV shows or, comic book adventures, I feel like they're coming more mainstream. It's coming more out of the light. I feel like now it's more open for everybody. Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, you only have to be a nerd. You only have to know. Like, it's such an open, wide, like, variety of stuff, and so open now that it welcomes everybody. People that are diehard fantasy people and people that are not. There's plenty of people that I know that they've never read a comic book in their life, but they'll say, yeah, I like the Marvel movies. I like the Lord of the Rings movies. So I feel like even if you're not a diehard fan, there's always something for you to like about it, which I think is very interesting. So I feel like being a nerd back in the olden times, and I use that term lightly, everyone's like, I'm not a nerd, but just that term nerd, you like comic books, video games, I feel like before people had to hide it, but now I feel like it's being more accepting in the world. So now if you tell everybody, oh, I'm a nerd, everyone's like, oh, okay, I accept that. Like, you don't have to just be like a jock or, something like that. But I'm not just, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think that how Game of Thrones was, a lot more people got into it because they read the books, but it also was how it became
I never read the
a
books.
pop culture phenomena with the merchandise, T-shirts,
Right.
and mugs, and all kinds of stuff, and how liking that was more like it became like a popular show, and it wasn't just, oh, this kid saw Lord of the Rings, 15 years ago. No, this genre is continuing to expand with different, shows and movies and everything, and it's becoming more accepted.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, being like Game of Thrones, it's about it's fantasy, it's like medieval and stuff like that, but that's not the only thing. Like that's not what the whole thing is about. It's about like
politics,
it's a drama, politics. So like you could take if you took off the dragons and the fantasy, it's like a normal like any TV show. Like The Walking Dead is like a drama and a horror show with zombie stories. You know what I mean? So it's like
survival.
I feel like that's why, and actually YouTube stuff that we watch all the time. They put it there. They said, they had the fantasy for the nerd, and then they had the sex and the blood and violence for the non-nerds to watch it.
Right.
So I'm just saying, like, I feel like you don't have to be like, I love the fantasy part. You could just like the story or the action or anything like that.
Well, it was an HBO series, so just keep that in mind.
Right. I mean, actually, the way I look at it now is that in this day and age, the way people look at, and when you even when you use the word, like nerd, that's like a loosely used term nowadays, almost like it's an archaic term. Like no one really uses the word nerd anymore because the way I look at it is now everybody, to a degree, in one form or another, is a nerd because, let's be honest, people, and I'm talking to everybody here when I say this, when you say that you love to watch shows like The Office, you are kind of a nerd. You do, whenever you say you love to binge watch Netflix, even a little bit, you are a nerd to a degree. You know what I mean? If you have some sort of love or dedication to a show, let's be honest, you are a little bit of a nerd. That's the truth. That's the reality there. So what I'm getting at is, even if you're not a diehard, person that's committed to something, look at it this way. At least you can relate to all people when it comes to certain topics. You may not be a fan of The Walking Dead, but you might be a fan of the Game of Thrones. May not be a fan of Game of Thrones, but you might be a fan of Marvel Cinematic Universe. You might be able to relate to everybody, and everybody will have a conversation where they can relate to each other on something. And, I know this is kind of a cop-out, but it is true. Anybody and everybody can relate to Disney. I'm sorry. If you had to me, you had a very, I don't want to sound judgmental, but you kind of had a weird childhood if you did not grow up with Disney in one form or another. Let's be real with that.
Even if you didn't like it, you definitely were exposed to it.
Exactly.
Not like,
come on, the classics. Come on.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of Disney and Marvel and everyone that owns everything now,
that's
like
an understatement. Seriously, that's an understatement.
Well, we wanted to also talk about how re-releasing movies and adding post-credit scenes.
Yeah.
It's, I mean.
Okay, I'm just gonna come out with it. I
go
personally
ahead.
feel that now I love Marvel and I love all the movies. I watched Endgame. We all watched Endgame together. I thought it was a really great movie. Okay, but I don't see the logical reasoning to re-release it in theaters with extra content here or there and a post-credit scene, almost like I'm paying for a full movie to get the little DLC. I personally feel it's money.
You too.
3 minutes.
I feel
3
like
to
it's
5 minutes.
Honestly. I feel
Honestly.
like if I had the choice, like they do all the time, like here's director's cut, the super cut, whatever, I would pay the money at home. But they're forcing me to, not forcing me, but they're pretty much saying if you want to see it first, go to the movie. So I have to pay more money to go to the movies to see 85%, 90% of the movie I've seen to get little things, Easter eggs that if you're not a diehard fan, that you're probably not going to catch unless they literally slap it in your face to wait for the end to say, oh, here's a Fantastic Four, here's X-Men, here's this. Why am I going to the movies to watch this? It's like when you go to the video games, like, go to pre-order a video game and they're like, oh, here's $60 for the game, and I have to pay another $20 to get a 5-minute cutscene for a reason. Yeah. They did that with Battlefront.
I mean, it's the same thing when, here's a prime example. Whenever they came out with Batman vs. Superman, let's be honest, and this is a diehard DC fan saying this, Batman vs. Superman kind of sucked. It did. It had its moments where it was good, but, they say that when they re-released it to show that extra 30 minutes of, unedited scenes, I can respect that. But what they're doing right now with Endgame to me is not right. Because I mean, it's like they are in the right for adding after the post-credit scenes. But you do that for the Blu-rays, for the DVDs. You mean to tell me I got to spend $12 to $15 to go back to the movie theaters to watch the same exact movie for an extra 5 minutes after credits? Come on. I mean, and mind you, I'm a diehard fan, both DC and Marvel, and I'm spending extra money for what? Like really, for what? When I could just basically buy the movie myself, Vudu online or like the actual DVD or Blu-ray, and see it right then and there. What? See the big screen of what? The next upcoming movie? Guess what? The next upcoming movie's coming out anyways, and we're going to be watching on the big screen as it is. So you're kind of like wasting time and wasting money. So that poses the question for myself, Vin, and Mark, and to you guys too. You can put this down in the comment section as well. Ask yourselves this: when Disney and Marvel does stuff like this, are they doing it for the fans, like us and you guys here, or are they doing it for the money? All of us got to do it for the money, but is it just for us, the fans, or is it for the money too?
Well, this reminds me back the first time I'd ever even heard about a post-credit scene, which was X-Men 3: The Last Stand.
I didn't
It
even
was
know they had one.
horrible. Awful sequel.
Well, I heard that the newest one was bad
Well,
too, but that's another topic.
That's a whole different topic. We can talk all about the X-Men franchise, but the first time I'd ever heard about it was how there was like a quick 30-second scene where you saw the true fate of Professor Xavier, and I'm like, should I go back and watch it for that? And then when I saw the clip later, no, definitely not. Proved to be not. And then it caught on. I mean, there was actually, I don't know if this was the first ever one. I don't know which was the first one ever, but I didn't know that there was one after Masters of the Universe. Skeletor.
The cartoon?
No, the movie.
Oh, you mean the movie?
With Dolph
Right,
Lundgren.
right.
Skeletor comes out of down in that pit that he fell into. He rises up out of this boiling water, and he's like, I'll be back. And
Well, you think about that.
I'll lead up to a sequel.
Right.
Well, you think about it.
But
That's always
no sequel.
That's always cliche. If you think about like the old cartoons, like
Yeah.
the person dies and he comes back at the end and like, "I'll get you next time," like
Captain
thing.
Planet.
Oh, yeah.
I just feel like
Um,
it's like what I think was that Marvel they did it not as like a cop out, but I felt like they used it to help give people more like that 1 5-second, 10-second little extra to be like, oh, I really want to see the other movie.
Well, they
and
know
also
that-
helps
Yeah.
with along the Easter egg. It helps people that don't know about the comics feel like, oh, I want to know, and they start questioning it and more, like, oh, I wonder what this is about. You get them really amped up for the next series.
Oh, yeah.
And then when Endgame just ended with nothing, and everyone was like, huh. And they had so many questions. I feel like Disney was kind of like, well, let's give them, what our ideas are, but at the same time, you could have did that in Spider-Man, because technically Spider-Man literally came out, a month or two after that.
Yeah, 2 months after.
So I feel like they didn't need to redo the Endgame. They could have just added a post-credit scene and Spider-Man to explain it, because he technically is what Iron Man was. Like he kicks off the next cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I also wanted to add how it was, so as if it didn't make enough money at the box office already. Now, when Avatar set the record that it did, to over $2 billion some odd dollars.
I thought it was 1.7 billion. I didn't know it was.
Oh,
2.
no. When Avatar set the record, it beat out Titanic by almost $1 billion at the time. I mean, we don't adjust these for inflation. We're not looking at how much like a movie like Gone to the Wind was when it came out versus Avatar, because I heard that if you adjust it for inflation, that's actually somewhere closer to like $4 million at that time. $4 billion.
Oh yeah. I didn't know
at that time.
That makes
but,
sense.
the way that Avatar, because that wasn't released it might have been released worldwide later, but that was a domestic release. Avatar was released, worldwide, and people went to see it multiple times in IMAX 3D, and that, set all kinds of records. And Avengers Endgame made $1 billion its opening weekend. I mean, it didn't need to be re-released, but as we were saying, the additional scenes were just, for the hardcore fans, and then, maybe someone hasn't seen it, but it's not necessary.
So in a way, when you look at Avatar, you got to ask yourself: did people go to see Avatar for the story, or did they go see Avatar for the graphics? So that's kind of like that kind of like splits the group. into two people. I mean, like, mind you, the people who come for the story, they enjoy the graphics too. But sometimes people go to the movie theaters like, wow, this is amazing. Oh my God, the graphics, the fight scenes, it's great. And in a way, Disney, when they re-released this Marvel movie, they basically were like, you know how much money we made on this one video, on this one movie. Now, what if we told Marvel fans, diehard Marvel fans, which, let's be honest, diehard Marvel fans run into millions of people, they basically figure, what if we re-release the same movie with a post-credit scene? Because when the three of us went to go see Endgame that night, we actually did say, you know, we asked each other, are you sure there is no post-credit scene at the end of this movie? We were double-checking each other, like, are you sure there's nothing there?
Yeah.
And we assured each other, like, no, that's it. There's nothing. It's a cutoff point. Then Marvel and DC realized this cutoff point, we can make more money off of this cutoff point. Let's add something on top of that that will also make them go and see the next film after that.
Right.
So I guess long story short is that if you guys put your comments on, so I guess the big question is, do you guys think that re-releasing Avengers Endgame is for us fans, or is it for them to beat out Avatar in the box office? So again, I'm Vince.
I'm Greg.
I'm Mark.
And that's the end of our video, guys. Thanks a lot. Please subscribe, and you'll see us in the next couple weeks for our next video, guys. Later.
Later.